So one of our readings from this morning, the passage from the Gospel of Luke, told us the story of Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. It is the story that we read every year on the first Sunday of Lent. And we do that because the temptation of Jesus comes right after his baptism, but before the call of the disciples. So the story of the temptation marks the beginning of Jesus' earthly ministry because he comes out of the wilderness. After that experience, he comes out of the wilderness and starts to proclaim the good news of the gospel. And so on Lent 1, we remind ourselves of that beginning as we begin our journey with Jesus towards the end of his earthly ministry. And over the next 6 weeks of Lent, we get closer and closer to the cross. And as we do so, we retell the events leading up to the crucifixion and then the resurrection. Jesus has promised to us a life of abundance and a life eternal. Now, that's not to say that we were promised an easy life where we're going to be given everything we desire. That's to say that despite our struggles that we are going to experience in life, each and every one of us, we're going to experience struggles, that despite that, we can still have a deep and rich relationship with God, our Creator, who remains faithful to us even through the struggles. And as we kind of remember all those pieces of the story from the beginning to the end, and the teachings that were in the middle, we kind of remember that through the season, because we don't just get to jump to the happy Resurrection Sunday. Easter Sunday is always a wonderful celebration, but we don't get to just jump straight there. There's a journey that we must take, and it's a journey that we take together. And as we do so, we tell and we retell to ourselves, to each other, and to the next generation. Our Sunday school kids who just went out, we tell it to them so that they will tell it to their children, and they will tell it to their children. So we tell and we retell our stories. Telling our stories is of utmost importance. And we do this every Sunday, but we particularly are intentional about it in the seasons of the High Holy Seasons, Advent and Lent. And it's important that we tell those stories because we need to remember where it is that we came from to understand where it is that we are as a church today. And we need to know and we need to be honest about where we are in order to make the wise choices and decisions about where it is we are going as a community of faith, where we are going as a church. And with every retelling of the story, we are called to pause and to give thanks and to praise our God who has held us through each step of the way. And we have been given a model of retelling our stories in the passage that we read from the book of Deuteronomy this morning, that Sue read for us. The wandering children of Israel, they are about to settle into the promised land. And it is a land of plenty, we are told. It is flowing with milk and honey. And no longer will the children of Israel, remember, Jacob's name changed to Israel, and that these are his descendants that have multiplied over generations. So the children of Israel, no longer will they have to rely on manna and quail to eat and to survive as they wander. They will now be settlers in a land that is brimming with good things to eat and to grow. But as they do that, they are warned not to forget where it was they came from. And once they have settled into this land, they are told that they gather gifts and they bring them to the priest to be blessed. And as they do so, they are to declare, "My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down into Egypt with a few people, lived there, and became a great nation, powerful and numerous." But then, fortunes changed, right? The Egyptians mistreated us and made us suffer, subjecting us to harsh labor. But then we cried out to the Lord, the God of our ancestors, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our misery, toil, and oppression. And then things shift again. And it goes on to a quick recap of the story from slavery in Egypt to the Promised Land, and how gracious God was in every step of the way. So the pattern that is described here in Deuteronomy is both a confession of the limitedness of humanity and the greatness of God. But it also reinforces what is to be a habit of celebration when you're speaking about God. And they do that by bringing the first fruits, it's called. And the confession finishes with, "God brought us to this place and gave to us a land that is flowing with milk and honey, and now I bring the first fruits of the soil that you, Lord, have given me." So the gift of first fruits is a celebration offering of their best. It's not an offering put together with what was left over. It's a giving of the first and the best. And as much as the celebration is this emotional response of joy, it's more than just an emotion. It's supposed to be more than just an emotion. It becomes a disciplined habit. And that's really important. That's a really important part. Because there would be years when they were not really feeling the joy, but they held the celebrations anyway. Because despite how they felt, it did not change the fact that God was good and merciful and brought them out of Egypt into the Promised Land. And it was not just a story for that first generation of settlers, and it wasn't just a story for the second generation of immigrants. It was a story of a people, a story for all generations, a confession for all generations. And just as we as a Christian church, we come into another season of Lent, it doesn't really matter whether we're feeling it or not. It doesn't matter whether you have heard the Easter story 1,000 times. We tell it again. Because no matter how we feel about the season, or how many times we have heard the story, it does not change the truth of God's grace made known to us through the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus the Christ. That is our collective story for all generations. That is our confession of faith for all generations, and so we tell and we retell those stories. You know, our scriptures reveal to us a theology of abundance. That is, the study of God is a study of God's abundant grace that is offered to humanity. The gift of grace to humanity from the divine. And this Lent, my friends, I encourage you to lean into that grace. May this be a season where you offer to God the first fruits of your life, the absolute best of who you are, and not just a portion of your leftover energy. As Christians, we understand that we have a responsibility to support the ministry of the church, and we do so by sharing our finances, and we share our time, and we share our skills together. But we also have a responsibility to grow in our faith by deepening our relationship with God. And that's an intimate connection that is just between you and God. And I invite you, I encourage you, I pray that you lean into that relationship. Talk to God and listen. Let that love deepen in your hearts. Let it deepen in your soul. And as you journey through Lent, give your heart over to God, that you might hear, you might learn, you might experience something new. And I offer you blessings on this journey. And God's people say, thanks be to God.